Welcome back to Side Quest, episode 22, Final Fantasy VII, episode 10. And I have back with me my esteemed colleague and shared adventurer on many adventures, Mr. Wes Schantz. Welcome back.
Hey, good to be back.
It's good to have you back. And when you texted me before this episode saying, got through Cosmo Canyon, and I had not even started playing, sort of like so often when you had finished a reading at graduate school and I had not even started the reading by the time I saw you, and probably still thought it wise to have an opinion about it. I thought it was interesting. When you said Cosmo Canyon, I knew I was in for an interesting bit of play. And, just even in the name itself, it ranges the extent of all that exists, right? The cosmos is in that which is heavenly and that which is beyond the mundane, and then the canyon, that which is ultra mundane, even like enmeshed into the earth, even deeper than earth. So this is a place that is a union of the opposites. And so even though it's a rock place, a petrified place, a dead place filled with ghosts of the past and elders and limited young people, there's also a connection to something rich and real that keeps it present and keeps people coming there as learners from this place. And so there's a dead aspect here as well as a living. And so it strikes me as like a university.
Yeah. It's a kind of observatory as well. And Bugenhagen, who is called Grandpa by Red 13, aka Nanaki. That's his real name, we learned. Anyway, so Grandpa up there at the top of the rock has got his observatory and a kind of planetarium in there, and he does walk you through some of the learning that I guess they lay out for the seekers who come to find their way to Cosmo Canyon. There's a lot in this bit, and I think the comparison to a reading of a great book is fair because it certainly weaves together a lot of themes of life and death, of maturation, of truth and betrayal, and even before you get here, I mean, we can't overlook Gongaga either, or Gongaga, that small town that you pass through on the way. So maybe we could start with that first before we forget to touch upon it.
Well, remind me some of Gongaga, just so I make sure that I actually got there.
So if you got the death blow materia, then you definitely went by it.
Okay.
There's a town.
Like I was there.
It's a town of, in a way, it's a town that relates to this because it's got a cemetery right in the front of the town, and in the background of the town is a ruined reactor.
Yes.
That exploded, and if you go check it out, Scarlet will hop out of a helicopter with Sang, and they will check out to see if there's any huge materia there. You don't know yet what that is, but they're looking for it, and they're like, oh, this is just junk materia. And then if you go check where they were looking, you'll find a Titan summon. So it's your next summon is a big, Earth dude. And so anyway, it's also the hometown of Zach's parents, though.
Yes.
And so in the furthest house, tucked away in this little town of people who've returned to nature since their reactor blew up, they've decided not to go with Shinra any further. Anyway, Zach's parents are there, and they ask, "Hey, are you in Soldier? Are you first class? Did you know Zach?" "Oh, that's so weird. Like, there can't be that many first class soldiers, and you guys didn't know each other, huh? That's so weird. It's too bad." And it's just like, oh, chills, right? You start to wonder what is going on, and it's one of those points in the game that just sort of lightly prods at the player, saying, who or what is waiting for Cloud in his past that he hasn't dealt with yet, the way that Red 13 and Barrett earlier have had to deal with theirs.
Right. It's almost like it's an exhortation to the reader, like Dante is so fond of doing. I think he does it something like 22 times throughout the Divine Comedy, and maybe even just in the Inferno. I forget. He does it fairly frequently. It's probably throughout the entire comedy, but that we go through and we see Barrett working through his issues that are causing him negative emotion, which he has to articulate and fix in the world. We see Red 13 and this Cosmo Canyon after Gongaga really having to deal with the demons of the past. And but they're constant reminders that Cloud is going to perhaps have an even bigger sort of meltdown himself because he has been even more self-deceptive, like we've said earlier, than these people. He has not been as forthright and in that way, in just observing and sort of taking part in other people's self-discovery. You, as the player, are like Cloud.
Yes.
Sort of through this window and this laboratory, or this observatory, observing what's happening without having to truly take part in it. And the game reminding you, well, actually, because of the existence of something like this that models this behavior, actually it's the other way around. You will have to deal with situations like these, and you'll either rise or fall to them. And it feels like something Ito would have done in Earthbound to remind the game player that the game is actually about them, and that the story is about them.
Yeah, it's on a much more cinematic scale here too, and I mean it is a really cool passage in the game when you enter Cosmo Canyon and you're sort of in this this self-contained segment of the game. It's its own adventure. You're accompanying Red 13 this time, not Barrett, but in other ways it's very similar, right? There's someone out there that you're going to find. It has to do with filling in the past. And again, I think it's very interesting that Cloud is always required to go along. And in that way, he is a kind of stand-in for the player. There's no clear reason why he should be tagging along in this, but Bugenhagen, the wisest of the wise men, insists upon it, right? Like, you come along and bring one other person too, right? This to fill out the party.
Which has really been your role the entire time, right? Like, even in the very first mission when you very first start on, it's like, what is this guy doing here? And he's the hired help. Like, he kind of stands out. And, I think that's such an interesting thing about being the hero. Well, two things about that. Bugenhagen himself, he is literally, I have it written down here, I have him described as a floating grandfather on top of Cosmo Canyon who lives in a planetary observatory and is described as incredible and knows everything.
Yeah.
So at the top of a canyon where you can observe the stars is a floating man who knows everything. So that's a figure of God. And he's also got extended age, 130, and he's also called grandfather. So he's even more godlike, I would say, than Albus Dumbledore or Gandalf, who are also figures of God.
Sure.
God the Father. And God the Father, not just in his dead aspect, but his living aspect too, right? Because he's actually teaching you something when you go out there about how things work. And I have a question about that, because that's really a major cinematic experience, right? That's a special moment when you go up there and you get to see the stars move. And I happened to be with Tifa at the time, so I got to see her amongst the stars, which was like seeing the most beautiful moment that Cloud could possibly imagine.
Right.
And she made a comment. Let me see. I have the note right here of what she said. Sorry that I'm looking. Oh no, well, I just have the interesting thing she said later, where she was like, "You've gone far away. You really, really are you, right?" But she said something like, "It's so beautiful. A shooting star. A shooting star goes past."
Yeah.
And did you have Tifa in your party? Did that still happen?
I think it's whoever's in your party, because I put Eris in to use her materia staff that you get from the fight against the Turks back in Gungaga, and so she's able to use like all the different summons at once, and it's just a beast. And anyway, but she's there, and it made me remember the very first scene when you start up the game and you see her face lit by the Mako light in Midgar, because it's the same music that plays there, that plays in the planetarium, that kind of twinkling sort of.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, and it's so it's the exact same kind of thing happening where the the microcosm, Cosmo, is lighting up the face of this character, right? Who you're learning about in the course of learning about the cosmos, which is cool.
Yeah, as if since what a human's natural environment is other people, is a social environment, that the deeper you learn about a specific person, the deeper you learn about that which is actually truly your world as a social creature. And we actually do this in sort of a meta way by learning through this figure of femininity rather than a woman herself, right? A character of a woman. And so it's as if there's a distilled amount of information in everything that she does that's even potentially richer, at least for a young person, than interaction with many other women, given his lack of sophistication and ability to actually extract information from his interactions at that time, being like sort of clumsy and saying dumb things rather than mining somebody's experience through interesting conversation.
It's interesting that you bring up how the player has to deal with their past the way that Cloud has to deal with their past, because in a way the way that you sort of learn about yourself in playing this game is through your response to what you're seeing happen, right? Whether you observe it with care or whether you sort of rush through, whether you try to make some connections between things and learn from it, or whether you take the long lesson scene with Bugenhagen as a kind of interruption to what you want to be doing, which is earning gil and leveling up your materia or whatever. So it's and I think that it's a really cool thing that he emphasizes the way that the Mako energy is already, it's like he seems to think it's already too late, and so it's up to the player to then supply the voice of, no, it's not too late, right? It's like, have more hope, have more kind of the drive then comes from the player rather than Bugenhagen saying, you be the hero, right? Instead, it's like you're seeing all this happen, and you're as Cloud, his nature is to kind of be standoffish and too cool for school. But then the player again is urged all the more, right, to invest, to be earnest and want to play that role. It's an interesting kind of jujitsu that the game does on you there. I think
I like the figure of the God the Father, and you see this frequently with Gandalf and Tolkien and even other sort of God the Father figures like Elrond. It's pretty consistent that like there's a pessimism about your ability to be successful given how little you happen to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even in Harry Potter to some extent, it's like Harry's never even a full-grown wizard when he's dealing with like the biggest, baddest dude that's ever existed, Voldemort. People don't even say his name, right? And so it's like it gives you the ultimate challenge, to put in Piagetian terms. It's like it builds a super mountain for you to climb, and so you have to develop super endurance in order to climb it. And it's important too, because I think the point made by the sort of God the Father figure in this instance is that that by Bugenhagen is that without you, it's not going to happen. It's surely not going to happen. It is fated that it is going to fail without a hero. And so you have to supplant yourself into that situation. You as the individual have to renew the society. You're the one who has to take the initiative, because he's not going to do it. He'll guide you from the back, essentially, but you have to put in the legwork.
Right. Yeah, it's cool. This is maybe this is the first time that you have a party member who doesn't actually appear in your fighting group, right? Because he is accompanying you the whole way down through those caves, and he'll pop out and say things from time to time, but he doesn't take part in any of the battles.
Yeah, and well, as we get closer and closer to that poltergeist Demon of the Past Guy boss fight. First, I want to mention what we do learn in the observatory during that beautiful scene. We learn about, and please add to this what I forget, we learn about what makes the life stream, that when people die, their bodies return to the earth, but so do their consciousnesses. And their consciousnesses, no matter what they are, tree or human, merge into a sort of collective consciousness called the life stream, which can then be mined by Shinra reactors and turned into Mako, which is essentially poison version of life stream, and is sucking thus the consciousnesses of former living beings and turning them into products. That is slowly but surely killing the essence or the life spirit of the planet, which is made up of the former consciousnesses of, the people you have loved who have died, and everybody and everything else.
Yep. He illustrates this pretty dramatically, right? Like visually, as he's explaining what's going on. You see a little kind of scene of the planet as it's going around. You see a little person on it. You see a little tree on it. Yeah, and how they break down into these little glowing particles that flow and then flow together. And yeah, I found that description of it really intriguing. That the consciousness is in some way finding its through its wandering, right? It runs into and finds other consciousness. And I thought that was kind of cool because it implies that what Shinra's doing is like the reverse, right? Like chopping up and freezing consciousness into a fixed form, and
they can then produce power for people who didn't create it, but can further develop it.
Yeah, because that's kind of what I was going to think about next, was like, because then we do see in Nibelheim and back in Cloud's flashback, we see them find that natural formation of crystals. And I'm kind of curious about how, I mean, you see this too, like with certain materia that you find out in the wild, right? It wasn't created, it wasn't manufactured. So it seems like there is a kind of natural cycle, and there's a certain amount of crystallization and utilization that would be, fine. It would be okay for the planet, or maybe, over time that crystallization would take place anyway, right? And over time it would finally run its course naturally as well. That seems like a possibility. But what Shinra's done is to isolate that one thing about this cycle of consciousness and life, and to like really just take it out of the cycle, right? And that seems like the same kind of wish, right, of anyone who wants to be a Dark Lord, right, who wants to assert power, who wants to have immortal life, and the well, in a way, that's the kind of Promethean urge as well, the Luciferian urge to seize and hold up one's own intelligent making above the natural course of things as ordained by whatever mysterious maker might be out there.
Right, and essentially to put the self above the community and to sacrifice the community for the self, sort of like in, I'm forgetting the name of that most recent Matthew McConaughey movie where he goes to space and has to save everybody. But basically there's a secret Matt Damon character, and he does the same thing in a very Luciferian way.
Interstellar, right?
Interstellar, yes, exactly. I was thinking of that. I was thinking also of a recent Netflix show, Altered Carbon, which sort of makes the same suggestion that when the ultimate sort of dark tendency in a human, and also Westworld makes this point, HBO, is when the individual tries to sort of transcend time and disequilibrates society so that now can exist but the future cannot. rather than sacrificing himself or his generation or his life in order for future generations to thrive. And so it's essentially an anti-Christian, like Luciferian, non-Christ-like idea, right? Because Christ's idea is he even dies for the people who betrayed him, so that the future will be better, and so that, you know, ideals can survive. And so the Luciferian idea is the opposite. The future will not survive so that I can survive in this way now. So I sacrifice all you and all future you for me. And that seems to be the idea behind Rufus, ruthless Rufus, as well. Sephiroth as well.
And he sort of has slipped out of the limelight here. It's kind of interesting how the characters, the villain type characters, sort of come and go. We hear about, you know, we're on the Sephiroth's trail. We know he's a step ahead of us at all times. Okay, but yeah, like Rufus, what's he up to right now? Like he flew off in a helicopter. We see Scarlet and Sang pop in, looking for huge materia. Right, so there's that. What are they up to? And I think, if I remember right, it's in Bugenhagen's planetarium room where the huge materia is eventually gonna end up, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of, it's like, you know, the plot thickens here, but we're finally getting a little bit more about Jenova as well, right? From the other elders around Cosmo Canyon. Yeah.
All right, yeah. So here are a few topics I just want to lay out for you, because so we circle around a fire, which I thought was an interesting event. We learned that essentially nobody is innocent, which I think is maybe an overstatement, but not too much of one. Avalanche was born here. Barrett, we learned, has repeatedly failed people now. The people in Corel, Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse, and he's probably thinking he's failing Marlene. We have the pensive and meandering score back here. So again, different from the energetic sort of tribal sort of deep drums and shakers and flute or sort of wind instrument of the Cosmo Canyon, which is going for that sort of Native American feel, with Red 13 with his bird's feathers and his crest, whose father was felled by arrows from another tribe. Pretty clear what they're going for there. Also, we have learned from Ares, just to connect to the Jenova bit, that she is a Cetra and she is alone. And then Cloud sits with her, and it's sort of an interesting moment from like all those people who played this game as like, adolescents. Because Cloud says, is there anything we can do for you? And does that mean we can't help? And she doesn't really respond. She doesn't give him a positive answer, or at least in my game. Yeah.
Yeah, she looks away, and Cloud sits by Tifa, too. If you go over and talk to Tifa, he does the same move, right? He's doing his, I'm sitting by you and giving you attention now. Yeah.
Yeah, and it goes just as badly with her, too, because that's when she lays down, you've gone far away, indicating he's very different from how he used to be. And you really, really are you, right? And connect that back with what you just heard at Zach's. Connect that back with the fact that you've been seeing white stuff in your head telling you weird things. That voice that you don't understand that was a little more prevalent in the beginning. It's there are cracks. Cracks are starting to show in the armor there, and that his story isn't quite adding up. This cloud that we're dealing with here, this cloud, this vague and ill-defined individual. So we also learned, just to lay out that Jenova bit, that Professor Gast found Jenova 30 years ago. This is from one of the elders, and he used to come here a lot. And so he's a figure of, I think, the dead father, like the dead good father, the old wise king in this positive aspect, because even Sephiroth looks to him for answers, but he's no longer there to give them. He's sort of like Mufasa from The Lion King in that respect. He was awesome, but he's gone. But he came here a lot, and he said, so he came back in a very bad state the last time, and he said that Jenova had not been an ancient and that he had done something terrible, which
Right.
which that's just so curious because now apparently Ares knows that Sephiroth / Genova are not like her. They are not truly ancients. And perhaps that actually has made her sad. Maybe she was curious. Maybe the story would have been more about her had they been, right? Like,
Yeah.
what would end up transpiring between her and Sephiroth? I mean, the ideal would be that, well, they're both sort of ideals, right? Would be them mating, right? Like producing like some super creature, or him trying to abduct her and doing something terrible to her in some like, rape of Persephone sort of way. But it doesn't go that direction. She again gets shut off from the story. You're unique and different. They're not like you. And even though that's curious for us, that is sort of sad for her. But again, yeah. So Cloud gets no respite. Tifa says, "You really, really are you?" And so yeah, and Professor Gas found Genova 30 years ago. Sorry, going back through this. And so yeah, okay. And the last thing I have here is that we have literal ghosts of the past to fight for Nanaki, and we learn the enemy skill Death Sentence.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. The way that the light around the campfire moment then shifts to, okay, now it's time to hike through the depths, right, of the caves that are underneath of that that canyon, new agey village place. You delve down through it, and you bring with you Bugenhagen, but the other elders, they tell you a lot, but they don't make everything super clear. And I found that pretty interesting. Like, you can seek them out and talk to them, and they'll tell you a good deal about what their theories are about Genova, and you hear more about the ancients too, right? The guy thinks that they were kind of traveling and cultivating life, but went to their rest, their well-deserved rest. That's kind of the gist of what I got from the other elder, who's back in the other room, like looking for something, and then he finds it. The first elder, the one who talks about Genova and Dr. Guest, he's in the bar, right?
Yes.
And so he offers you a drink when you first talk to him, and then later he tells you his whole bit about the secret of Genova. But they don't. You still are kind of getting pieces of things. They don't put it all together, and again, you don't fully hear Eris's side of it, right? Whatever is going on with her, she's not saying it yet, and so you don't yet kind of work the whole thing out. Instead, you dramatize this descent, and so in some way, that's like what you get instead of the story, right? Instead, you delve back into the past of Nanaki, his relationship with his Mufasa father, and you play that out through fighting the dead spirits, right? Yeah, the ghosts, who are pretty creepy, and then you pass through kind of like a lava, or it could be just I don't know what, like poisonous vats that bubble. There's that part where if you're running, you slip on the slippery stuff and you get stabbed by the stabber.
It hurts you too.
Brutal, yeah. And you fight those huge spiders, which catch you in their webs and are super creepy and powerful. I like the feel of playing that part of the game, because it's like, okay, like I know what's going on here. Like this is some Final Fantasy right now. Like, we're in a dungeon, we're proceeding towards the end of the dungeon, we're finding treasures along the way, we're fighting enemies and avoiding obstacles. Right, everything's so nice and clear cut in a way, but it's that parallel to the untold story, which I find very interesting, and it really grabs me. This part of the game is like, up till now I've kind of been like, okay, I can save and I'm done for the week, but now I'm like, oh man, I want to go on to Nibelheim. This part is so cool.
Yeah, and it is interesting just to what extent that cave is a representation of going into one's past, or going into the attic of one's soul, where the cobwebs and the slippery the slippery slopes and the spiders and the ghosts of the past reside, that you have to go clean out in order to understand yourself better. And so, we defeat this poltergeist, and it's sort of a creepy moment even before we do fight him, because he's this giant creepy face, and we're like, what is this? And Bugenhagen says, this can't be. And so there's this notion that even this God the Father figure did not know something, that you are now totally necessary for this. That he could not have predicted what you are about to have to deal with.
Right, which is heartening, right? Because he's a bit pessimistic up there at the start. And so if you can show him something new, then it kind of brings him back to life in a way too, right? And he has sealed this door shut, and he opens it for you. And I find that a real interesting kind of metaphor in itself, right? That you've got this part of yourself or this thing that happened that's so traumatic that you seal it, and so it doesn't leak into other stuff and doesn't mess up the rest of your daily life and whatnot, and your beautiful, sit around the campfire sort of world. Okay, very nice. But at some point, you've got to unseal that door, and you do have to descend with someone new, right? With someone who brings something that you did not foresee, that you did not hope for maybe, and also brings maybe something old as well, right? Something connected to that place and that has that link. So that dynamic is really interesting to think about. The sealing and unsealing, the new component, the old component, that you can in some way interject something, and I'm thinking now, like a story, right? Like a different telling of a story into what had been a really negative thing, and transform it. And the way that you defeat that spirit at that boss fight, you can cast life on it and it will end the fight. One hit kill, which is, or one hit unkill, which is cool. Because what does that symbolize, right? Like the healing is the solution, and then you go and you see the statue out there.
That's fascinating, because it's just, if you just convert or just turn towards it or just have the revelation or give it life there in terms of embodying it, then it ceases to be a ghost. It ceases to be disembodied. Very good. And so I was just making a connection while you were saying that to Nanaki's petrified father by poison arrows, crying tears that rejuvenate his son. Sort of like materia. And in the same way that Fox the Phoenix cries tears onto Harry Potter, who's just been stabbed by a basilisk, which is a creature that turns people to stone.
Oh, yeah.
And so he's healed by these phoenix tears, which you might take to be that he's now reintegrated a part of himself from the underworld, and now is being rejuvenated like a phoenix, and brought up from the dead underworld, the Chamber of Secrets, into the upper world of being a reintegrated human or sentient creature who can adapt to the world again and be in the real game outside the self. And that this is that sort of moment for Nanaki, and that he had this petrified, poisonous image of his father poisoning himself, to where he found himself somehow in Hojo's laboratory, in an ugly, ugly place, in that ugly, ugly city of Midgar, where all of these characters found themselves at some point, except for Yuffie, if you have her, which I don't.
Oh, come on. You still didn't get Yuffie?
There are a couple things I've still been missing. Still been missing a few things. That, and I need to go back and get Beta as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, so there are some enemies in those woods around Gongaga that will give you a petrifying stare as well. So that theme is definitely there and kind of prepared for a bit as well. And it's not an enemy skill. The frog song, which is so annoying, is an enemy skill. But the death sentence is a skill as well. You mentioned it. It like the petrify stare thing. It casts this thing on you that counts down, and And if it reaches 0, then no matter how much health you have, whatever, you die, right? Your character just dies. And you learn it if you have the right materia, right? You have the enemy skill materia equipped, then you learn the death sentence move, and you can use it right back at, well, enemies who it's effective on. Who I don't think, I didn't try using it down in the caves because I assumed that it probably wouldn't work on these types of enemies. But I am looking forward to finding ways of, using that to do fun things like, cast it on an enemy who's too powerful for me right now, and then be able to kind of like ride out the fight until that enemy just dies. Like that would be, a really useful thing. And again, you bring it back from that dark place which you had been afraid of going into, of facing.
And it gives you higher capacities, more exploratory ability, because now you can go to places where you can face threats which are larger than you could have, which make you stronger faster in a more efficient way. So it's really worth your time.
Totally. And you find the added effect materia down there too. It's a blue one that you can pair to, like cause status effects by just hitting people with your weapon if it's got a paired slot up there. So like that could be a pretty, again, like a super useful thing to have, or you can use it as a defense as well. And it's like being able to defend against certain status effects, which can be super annoying and or devastating if you're not able to block them.
Yeah, and so we have a revelation, right? The hero is present at this great moment, and that seems to be what heroes do. They add depth to the moment. And the great warrior was his father. So Bugenhagen has been pulling us along this string the whole time. And apparently how we were thinking about Red 13's father, which was he was a coward, is what Nanaki thought. But his mother, who fought in the front, who was the obvious hero, she got all the credit as a hero. But his father, who got no credit, who nobody knew what he did, he fought off every one of this tribe himself. He had the much harder struggle and for zero glory. So he's actually even more of a hero to his son. And it's even more special because it is his son that learns this. And so his son howls in this bestial way, even though he can speak. That reminds me so much of the Wordsworth poem that we're reading right now, and of Ginsberg. And he just howls, and that's what hears from his father. And it's just, it's like it even caught me up that moment. It's like one of those moments Jordan Peterson talks about where just, even though you can't articulate what it is about it, and maybe we can, it still hits you.
Yeah.
And it makes no sense.
I think part of that is the way that you're prepared for it. Yeah, by Bugenhagen sort of stringing you along with bits and pieces, and you start to sort of suspect, like, could it be, right? And then, like you say, that howl to the moon, which is a powerful kind of archetypal sort of image, right, of the wild, of which to which we're still drawn, right? Even when we set up the campfire, why do we go camping in the first place, right? To get back in touch with wild things, with wildness, and get away from the over built up Midgars that we live in. And when you get through the cave and you fight the ghost and you come out the other end, you're actually no longer in the cave, right? He's actually clear out the other end and outside under the stars again, right? Under the moon. So it's a kind of beautiful image, very, very Inferno-esque, right? The way down is the way up, and you come out and where you're least expecting to be out in the fresh air again after that long dungeon. That's where you find yourself.
Yeah, and I was saying also like Plato's cave, because what you do is you go out there in order to restore an ideal so that you can embody it back in the world. You don't just go out there and hang out there and stay out there. You got to be like Samwise Gamgee from Lord of the Rings. You got to come back, and you got to bring it back with you. And that seems to be the important second piece, that you not only need to have the revelation, but then embody the revelation. You need to be the humanoid God figure nailed to the cross, as it were. You have to actually embody yourself in the world, embody your thoughts. You have to do things, right? Even though nothing will ever be good enough for you, of course, in your mind. The ultimate test is in the world. And so it's Red 13's father passed that test with flying colors. He is an awesome hero. And what's interesting is that Bugenhagen reflects this in saying he protected us then and he protects us now. And so what does that mean? Because now he's petrified like a gargoyle, right? And what gargoyles are just like what standards of eagles or snakes are petrified representations of threats we've overcome who have made us into what we are. And so it's supposed to remind us that we're stronger than jaguars and more fearsome and cunning than snakes, and that we're incredible, and we should remember that. And so what Nanaki's father seems to represent is, look at how much you can be. And that ideal restores the community over and over again. And that ideal is what gives the community security, because they're so strong as a people that it's even stronger than walls, which, the Spartan people proved by living on a plain.
Yeah, I like that that suggestion that it's his example, even though no one knows about it, right?
Not yet.
And that's so interesting to me, because I think that is, very much the case with a lot of the great books and the great events in history. Not many people necessarily know about them, and yet those are the things that keep them safe and that undergird their very unaware sort of happy existence, right? Or not so happy existence. But anyhow, it's down there and it's making it less bad than it could be. And so, to go and like encounter that, to have that kind of moment of meeting and understanding finally what happened in the past, what happened down there in the dark, right? And continue, and that it continues to resonate to the present, whether you're aware of it or not. And then of course, Nanaki, aka whatever you named him, joins your party again, right? He doesn't just stay at his hometown. He's ready to move on and go with you and carry that forward. And he's got a super strong new weapon as well, which just like appears in your inventory. So you can equip it, and it's way more powerful than his previous weapon.
All right. Yeah. What is the name of that weapon again? I want to make sure I got it.
It's called Seraph Comb. So it's the highest order of angel, and comb because you wear it on your head to bonk enemies with when you jump on them. So that's how it works.
So it is a literal embodiment of a higher perspective.
Yeah.
By him.
Yeah.
Oh, so that's excellent. And and what's interesting too is what it shows is that the path of individuation doesn't just have like some spiritual aspect, but it has a functional relevance. That he has become stronger and more capable so that he can produce a better effect for the group. And so he's become more useful because he's integrated more parts of himself and thus a higher level awareness and thus a higher capacity to wield skills. And because of that higher perspective that's embodied or represented by the seraph cone, the seraph, like you were saying. So I think that's very strong and very interesting, and that precisely the reward for doing that is getting to come back to reality with a bigger bag of tricks, and getting to come back into the game with a slightly better awareness of where the holes are, and perhaps there are fewer holes, or at least you can deal with them better. You have a better jumping skill or something.
Well, you better be ready because you're about to go to Nibelheim, right? And so you are going to finally see clouds, right? And Tifa's passed as well. And so you're going to fight some green dragons up there, right? Because that's the monsters that just roam randomly through the mountains around Nibelheim. So you better, have some something to take, something material to bring with you from your quest so far to be ready to handle it. And I wouldn't I don't know if going back all the way to get beta is actually necessary, but it certainly doesn't hurt. It's super useful in a pinch.
Okay, well, I like that. And so it's interesting that you said Nibelheim, because I think the place we go to now is called Nibble, between two mountains.
Oh, okay. Maybe we're not quite there.
Just saying that, because that was a question I had. I said, why is it called Nibble and not Nibelheim?
I haven't actually entered it yet, so I don't know. That's curious.
Yes, I thought I was curious as well, as if that was, again, just one of those little small things. And I only walked in for a second, and I'm not ready to go try that piano piece to try and get Tifa's ultimate weapon. But I did walk into Cloud's mom's place just because of the last time. Remember that creepy memory where you're buzzing in and buzzing out, stacking out the last moments before she's alive, and there's some woman there, and you interact with her and say, tell me your story. She says, or you say first, you speak first. Not very good inquirer. I lived here until I was 14. This place burned down. And she says, like, what are you, crazy? And the weirdest thing is when you first walk in too, and the party sort of comes out of you and then talks to you.
Mm-hmm.
I had read 13 and he said, burnt down. I thought this place burnt down. Cloud, did you lie to us?
Oh,
interesting. Did you lie to us? It's like, well, did he lie to himself first and foremost?
Mm-hmm.
And, it's just so interesting about the lie. Jordan Peterson was saying about something Freud says about, and the Freudians about the unconscious, is that you may have forgotten how you got to where you are based on the lies you've told, because even though you were conscious the first time you told a lie, you might just have not, you might not have taken account of that with the consequences that followed. And when you iterate that behavior, it might have become unconscious by that point. And so you have to go back to that original point and figure out when you made that conscious error, that sort of moral error, and how that has been afflicting you like the judgment of God in the future unconsciously. And so it's interesting that now sort of that this is sort of catching up with Cloud. Has he been lying? And how far can you get based on a lie in reality? And it's looking like maybe not that far.
Not as far as he seems to want to. Right? Yeah, Cloud is such an interesting character because it seems like he really does embody your own spirit of like inquiry, right? Like you're asking and talking to people, and asking them to tell their story and stuff. But he constantly also gets in the way, right? His own personality keeps like sort of buzzing in front of you, like in that scene, right? Like it makes it physically difficult to see what's going on. He's a messed up hero figure, and the kind of struggle that he's about to go through in Nibelheim, I think will be really interesting to compare and contrast with what we've seen so far about Barrett's and Red 13's. So that'll be a doozy for next time.
Yeah, we're gonna get deep. And we can't forget that as we see it being loaded up for Cloud, perhaps also for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, well, another excellent time had.
Yeah. Thanks again for keeping this kind of regular time. I feel like we can, again, try to implore our listeners to like send us some questions and comments and stuff, and like tell us all the stuff that we've been missing, because I know there's more stuff to this game than what we're able to get to. And just let us know how your delve into your past is going, as well as you're following along with us.
Yeah. And you know, just because that's such an interesting note to end on. It's funny because just as a piece of nostalgia from the past, this was a sort of a project that I didn't know would take this form, but something I always wanted to do. And you always suggested that I do during graduate school several years ago.
Yeah.
Like you were like, you got to write your magnum opus on like a Jungian approach to Final Fantasy VII. And actually, you know, we've gotten even more expansive than just the Jungian approach. You know, we've added, you know, sort of computational neuroscience, behavioral methods, other psychotherapist methods. Like, you know, the amount of information we bring into this analysis is far more extensive than the original idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, the fact that we're actually working on this is pretty cool.
It's remarkable. Yeah. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. So, well, you know, those of you who are listening, this is our attempt at magnum opus level stuff. So, you know, you be the judge.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, until next time, take it easy.
Take it easy.